The Wheel and the Butterfly. Written by Justice3442 and read
by Justice42.
Part 4. Dan vs. Roommate. Epilogue / Part 4.5 Prologue. The crescent moon hung like a wounded animal in the dark. Stars mostly smothered by black clouds that blotted the sky. Beneath lay a dark forest, a twisting mass of large, imposing trees with branches that snaked out in all directions. Below them was an unforgiving landscape of large rocks that jutted out like daggers from the ground, and moss-covered remains of long-dead trees being slowly consumed by the forest itself. The warped branches of these trees jutted up from the ground like twisted, broken limbs, desperately trying to reach out of the ground towards the forest canopy. Pinky ran through the hazardous maw of the dark forest as if her life depended on it. Mostly because it did. The 7-foot-tall, chainsaw-wielding, hockey-masked killer was hot on her heels. Her high heels in this case.
Why the hey am I even wearing these? I didn't think I even owned a pair.
As if on cue, a heel broke and Pinky went tumbling to the ground, banging her body on all manner of sharp rocks and painful-looking branches that stabbed and cut her flesh until a large, shattered tree stump stopped her, its remains shooting up into the sky like a collection of swords and spears. Pinky rubbed her sore, bruised, and cut body. Her vision blurred as something warm and viscous started to flow into her eyes. Pinky wiped at her face and examined her hand closely. Her now red hand shone sickly in the dingy moonlight.
I must have cut my head in the fall. I need to keep going. The killer...
Pinky heard the sound of a chainsaw revving and looked up as the color drained from her face. The hockey-masked killer was quickly approaching, the forest seemingly giving way to him as he charged, as if his malevolent presence even frightened the very woodland that had brought Pinky to her knees. Pinky tried to sit up, but felt something clutching at her dress. She looked down at the skimpy cocktail dress she was wearing.
Oh, I don't believe this. There's barely a sash's worth of material on this thing, and it manages to get caught on a thorn bush.
Pinky struggled to rip free as a remorseless thorn bush held fast, cutting dozens of tiny lacerations into her thigh.
Why am I even dressed up like this? Was it my goal to get hit on by as many creepy guys as possible tonight?
Pinky's train of thought derailed in a fiery crash, killing all on board as a chainsaw noise exploded into a crescendo of buzzing fury. She looked up to see the killer mere feet away from her, chainsaw held high above his head, glinting sharply in the moonlight. A lump caught in Pinky's throat, but escaped into a blood-curdling scream as the saw came down upon her body.
Ah!
Pinky sat up in bed.
Ouch!
She exclaimed as she hit her head on the lamp suspended above the bed.
Why did Dan even put that lamp there in the first place?
Pinky raised a hand to stop the swinging pendulum of pain manifest in lamp form, her pink pajamas soaked through, and her breath labored as she took stock of her surroundings. She was in the bedroom she shared with Dan in their apartment. Tiny beams of streetlight shone through the window blinds, covering her and the bed in tiny lines made of electric light.
Dan,
Panic gripped Pinky as she realized her roommate was not in the bed. She swallowed, feeling very much alone and terrified of the sudden vast emptiness that seemed to consume the tiny apartment.
Dan?
Pinky called out in a frightened tone.
Dan, where are you? I'm scared and...
Chemical plant explosion!
Dan screamed, suddenly popping up from under the bed. Pinky made a loud, startled yeek and fell off the bed with a loud thump.
Noxious fumes are coming this way, killing all who inhale them!
Dan continued. Pinky was on her feet in a flash.
Right, situation C. I'll go get...
Also, those who inhale the fumes raise back to life with the hunger for the flesh of the living!
Dan added.
Woo, situation C plus Z. Wait.
Pinky paused as a small smile appeared on her face.
Romero or Snyder?
Dan reached up to pat his taller roommate on the head.
Very good, young Padawan. Romero,
he answered. Pinky smiled large enough to make an audible squee sound.
Squee?
I'll get my bag, the gas masks, my crowbar, and the rifle, she sang out, bounding towards the closet.
And I'll grab Mr. Mumbles, the crossbow, my hatchet, and the car,
Dan replied.
Meet you outside?
Pinky asked as she donned a pair of pink flats, her cutie mark painted on the tops in acrylic paint.
Yep,
Dan replied as Mr. Mumbles bounded up to him with a meow and ran up his outstretched hand. Pinky excitedly opened the door to the apartment and shut it behind her, pink crowbar in hand, her pink bag slung diagonally across a shoulder, a black satchel slung diagonally across the other. A brown strap also crossed her chest parallel to the black strap, and the butt of a wood-grain rifle protruded up over a shoulder. She giddily put her foot on the rail to the second-story walkway and looked over. Dan had already positioned the car. Pinky managed to awkwardly pull her weight onto the walkway railing and fell forward, spreading out her arms and legs as she impacted the roof of the red hatchback below. Thump! Dan glanced up at the roof of his car at the sound of someone flicking themselves onto it. A petite hand appeared from the passenger side window, pink fingernails and feminine fingers arranged in the sign of A-OK. Pink flats entered the car through the window, followed by pink pajama-clad legs, a pink bag and a black bag, a woman's pink pajama-clad torso crisscrossed with straps of varying color, a woman's bright smiling face, bright pink curly hair, the butt of a rifle, and finally pink pajama-clad arms attached to slim hands and fingers. "How'd I do? How'd I do?" Pinky asked excitedly from the passenger seat. Dan gave her a giant grin and wagged his finger back and forth.
Aren't you forgetting something?
Pinky thought for a second and looked down. "Aw, nerds!" she exclaimed as she reached for her seatbelt and buckled it. Dan clicked a stopwatch, then produced a sheet of paper on a clipboard marking a number of places with a pen.
Not bad at all.
He commented.
I had to ding you for the seatbelt, but you acted quickly. Remembered all the right things and got out of the apartment in record time despite having to grab extra gear. This is a personal best for you."
"Yes!" Pinky exclaimed to herself with a smile and a fist pump.
Ba-twang.
She closed her eyes, leaned back into her seat, and quietly began to hum the laughter song to herself. Dan started the car and pushed a tape into the tape player embedded in the dash. Soon the sound of a rhythm bass and electric piano filled the car.
Hungry?
Dan asked.
I'm thinking Lenny's.
Dan shifted the rear-view mirror so Pinky could see into the back seat. The sound of music was quickly joined by Pinky's laughter. "You got it out of storage, I see." The back seat sat, occupied by a change of clothes for Pinky, Mr. Mumbles, and the pancake thrower the two had constructed sometime prior.
What can I say? I'm a man who likes pancakes.
Dan said, grinning mischievously.
Mostly when they're flying through the air at dangerous speeds, though.
Dan admitted. Pinky smiled. "It sounds like a wonderful evening, morning." Dan pulled out into the street.
Hey, things seemed intense when you woke up. Did you want to talk about it?
Dan asked. Pinky thought about this with an audible, "Nope," she answered with a smile. Dan smiled and shrugged.
Okay, just remember that I'm always here if you need to talk.
Pinky reached over to the steering wheel and gave Dan's hand a squeeze. "I know, Dan," she said warmly. The red hatchback drove off into the street-light-lit street. Carrying an oddly content misanthrope, a pink pony turned human who felt her fears melt away, a cat who understood English, and enough weapons and gear to survive a chemically created zombie horde. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Spike asked for about the half-dozenth time. "You remember what happened the last time you used time magic?" he added. Twilight's horn glowed, casting a purple light all over the vast stone room and the books spread out all over it, her own the only source of illumination.
We're just going to observe the past through a viewport. Given how things went last time I traveled to the past, I doubt actually going back would be a good idea.
"All right," Spike said tentatively. "If you're sure."
As sure as I'll ever be.
Twilight admitted softly to herself. A purple beam shot out from her horn and stopped in a spiral of purple light a few yards in front of her. Eventually it faded, revealing a large plate-sized window. The room darkened as a dim light from the portal became the only light in the room. Twilight and Spike looked into the portal, observing the 6 ponies from the past. Spike drew close to Twilight. "Oh, can they hear us?" he whispered.
No?
Twilight responded in a whisper.
The portal only transfers images and maybe magic.
"Oh, then why are you whispering?" Twilight shushed the baby dragon.
I'm trying to concentrate. I need to use my magic to sense what happened without creating any light. It's harder than it looks.
"Oh, sorry," Spike whispered. The two paused as Twilight on the other side of the portal opened the door. "Hey, it's me. Looking good, Spike," Spike exclaimed.
Shh.
The two watched as a blue glow began to emanate through the recently opened door. Suddenly, the room was filled with red light from behind Spike and Twilight. A red bolt shot out of the darkness of the room, shot through the portal, intercepting a blue blast that was headed straight for Pinky. The combined red and blue bolts hit Pinky and she was gone. Twilight quickly closed the portal. What happened?" Spike fearfully exclaimed.
I don't...
Twilight used her magic, attempting to sense the residual energies of the bolt just fired through the very room. A small feeling of disorder and chaos entered through her horn and traveled down like a tremor.
I know who's responsible.
Twilight said, her eyes narrowing as determination entered her expression. You do? Who is it?" Twilight raised a forehoof into the air and shouted at the heavens.
Discord! Twilight Sparkle versus Discord.
Author's note: when life gives you lemon, make combustibles to set life's house on fire. Quote unquote 2, quoted by paraphrase the poet they showed here. Also, guest star, The Plot. Welcome back, Plot. You're My Best Friend, written by John Deacon. Copyright Emmy Music Publishing. Rule your data, expand your vision. Net app, .1. Net views, 1.
Authors not revised.
The crescent moon hung like a wounded animal in the dark. Dim stars dotted the heavens, stars mostly...
No, just roll with it.
Stars mostly smothered.
Stars muffle sweater. But the black clutter, the blood of the
What?
skin. Beneath the lay.
Are you sure this is a good idea?
Wrong.
Are you,
He's a weenie.
Are you sure? Are you
Shut up!
Not in the bloopers.
When is the last time you've ever said anything that matters?
Good. Are you sure this is a good idea? Thanks for listening, listeners.